Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kim. We'll get started in just a few minutes. I think we can get started. My name is Kimberly Beer. I'm the Senior Director of Public Policy at the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation, and it's wonderful to have so many people joining. I'm just looking as we are welcoming more people in as they log in. Before we get started, I just wanted to let you know that we will be recording this, and throughout the webinar, I will be monitoring questions as best I can. So please feel free to submit a question in the chat and/or contact us after the webinar. I see that the captioning is not, is not appearing. Julia, I'm not sure if you can help out with that before we get started. Great. We're working on that technical issue, and so I appreciate your patience, and we'll go ahead and get started. So I want to welcome everyone. It's been several months, actually a couple months since we last spoke, and if I can't imagine having chosen this date, not realizing what would have had transpired this past week and last night as well. We'll get to that. But first, I want to talk a little bit about some notable events and go over the agenda. So we're really thrilled that you're here. And if we could go to the next slide. Today, we're going to be covering a lot. If we could just go back to the agenda real quick. We'll acknowledge some of the activities that have happened and some key events that have happened this month and the last few weeks, as well as, of course, a lot of activity in Congress that we'll go over, and welcome your questions and any concerns you may have. We'll go into lots of our work around our Disability Coalition and our grassroots advocacy updates. And I want to thank everyone for their continued work and dedication to the Grassroots Advocacy Program, our Regional Champions Program. So I want to welcome all of those who've joined us, and anyone who's new and you're interested in learning more about advocacy, Gerard will reach out. I mean, you can reach out to Gerard and he'd be happy to talk to you about the program. Next slide, please. Here's our panel. I'm so grateful, as always, from our colleagues from Waxman Strategies, as well as Angel and Gerard, a part of the Reeve Foundation. We're an awesome team, and we're really grateful to be able to work with all of our advocates to work on advancing all of our really, really important and critical advocacy priorities. Next slide, please. I want to acknowledge, obviously, we're coming out of Spinal Cord Injury Awareness Month. We did lots of activities. I hope that you're tracking the work of the Reeve Foundation through our social media channels. And of course, through Gerard's newsletter. If you're not a part of that, please let us know. We'll get you signed up. And we have some other really key important activities happening in the next 2 months that we just wanted to highlight here. And the Reeve Foundation will be commenting on these and participating in some activities in the next 2 months. So please look out for that as well. Next slide, please. Before we get started, I wanted to acknowledge, I know many of you are reading the news, and we lost a huge loss in the Senate this past 2 weeks. Senator Dianne Feinstein passed away at the age of 90. She had served the people of California for over 50 years. And she was the longest serving woman in the United States Senate. And, she dedicated her life to advancing civil rights. She worked on gun violence prevention. She also, of course, helped pass the American with Disabilities Act of 2008, Amendments Act of 2008. And we wanted to acknowledge her life and her service. And we'll miss. I had the chance to work with her office, and I know she really acknowledged the work of the Reeve Foundation, and we're just really sad at her loss. Next slide. And Governor Newsom, he quickly nominated and appointed our new senator, LaFonza Butler. She was sworn in yesterday, and she's really made history. So we're thrilled. I can't wait to get to know her and meet with her office. She's the first openly gay, lesbian, Black senator to serve in Congress. And she will also be the third Black woman to ever serve in the Senate. So it was a really big day yesterday, despite some of the other news that we were hearing. Senator Butler came from Emily's List, and she has spent a lot of time working in labor organizations, especially working on the caregiving issue. So I really look forward to connecting with her staff, especially around caregiving. And so we look forward to having her in the Senate. And someone else noted it's Deaf Awareness Month also. So I apologize that we left that out. So thank you also for pointing that out to us. Next slide, please. And of course, it was Christopher Reeve's 71st birthday at the September 25th. And we continue to remember his legacy and all that he's contributed to the foundation and to all those living and impacted by paralysis. We have the pleasure and privilege to continue to work with his children who are really involved still in the foundation. And we work to honor his legacy as well as Dana's legacy as we continue our really, really important work. And then finally, I know many of you have either participated, hopefully you have, in an activity, an event, a webinar around acknowledging the 50th anniversary of the Rehab Act of 1973, an extremely important piece of legislation that laid the groundwork for many, many disability laws that soon followed. And it prohibited federal agencies and programs from discriminating against individuals with disabilities, especially any federal program or agency receiving federal funds. And this is a landmark legislation, and HHS recently in the last month on the day of the anniversary announced key updates to the regulation, really important additions to the act, and the Reeve Foundation and other organizations will be commenting on that. We're happy to send you more information. We have a blog listed about some of the key provisions in the regulation, and we are really looking forward to seeing those implemented. So it's a really big win for the disability community, and we continue to acknowledge its influence and impact on the world and, of course, on the disability community. Next slide, please. I'm going to have my colleague, Angel, talk about some of the activities we've been doing throughout Spinal Cord Injury Awareness Month and throughout October as well, and throughout the summer. I realized that the last time we spoke was in July, so we're excited backtracking some of the activities that we participated in and some of the key events that have taken place. Angel?
Thank you, Kim. Hi, everyone. I'm going to quickly share an experience I recently attended with one of my colleagues, Jamil Payton, our manager of racial health equity at Reeve. Jamil and I attended the Congressional Black Caucus's Foundation's 52nd annual legislative conference. This was a wonderful event, and we were so thankful to be able to attend and represent Reeve. At the conference, members of the CBC host policy sessions on topics that are and issues that are important to them. And Jamil and I were able to attend sessions on issues ranging from housing to independent living, caregiving, and I attended numerous sessions on gun violence and gun violence prevention, and with like Senator Warnock, Congresswoman Lucy McBath, and then you'll see here I was fortunate enough to meet with Representative Maxwell Frost, who is the youngest member of Congress. He's the first Gen Z member of Congress who's very passionate about issues related to gun violence. And soon after I met with him, he went off to the White House. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see there he is with President Biden and Vice President Harris announcing the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. So this office is dedicated to reducing gun violence, and it'll be led by the vice president. And we are really excited to hopefully get to work with them, because we know that gun violence does affect so many members of our community, unfortunately, may find themselves with spinal cord injury or paralysis due to these incidences. So I was very happy to make these connections, and we hopefully will be able to announce more things in the future of our work with them. Next slide. I'll hand it over for congressional updates now, and I'll tell you more about other things we've been working on later. You go, John.
Thank you so much, Angel. Hi, everyone. My name is John Sawyer. I'm one of the two members of our team from Waxman Strategies who are privileged to work every day with the Reeve Foundation team, Kim, Angel, Gerard, Regina, Maggie, and the rest of the team. Our work focuses on engagement with Congress and the congressional process. So it is an interesting time. If everybody's been reading the news, there's a lot to report on. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll start by sort of telling us where we stand with government spending. And then I'll talk for a few minutes about what the government spending debate and what the recent developments have led to in terms of some of the recent changes in congressional leadership. Then I'll turn to my colleague Celicia to talk in particular about the Federal Aviation Administration legislation that we're tracking as well. But as folks who've been on these webinars before know, our team pays close attention to the annual appropriations process. That's the process by which Congress goes program by program through federal government spending, decides which programs will be increased, which programs will see decreases in funding, which programs will be created, which programs will be eliminated. And increasingly, I think this has become the focus of some of the most contentious politics going on right now in Congress. And so I think going into last weekend, many of us expected, because the House and the Senate, Democrats and Republicans were all in very different places on the question of government spending. Many of us were expecting to wake up Sunday morning and find that the government had gone into shutdown, which is what happens if they can't come to any kind of agreement. That was actually averted pretty close to the last minute when House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who's pictured here, decided that the House was unable to pass a bill extending government funding with only Republican votes. He changed what the extension of government funding bill, also known as a continuing resolution, what that continuing resolution would include, and in essence made it more palatable to bipartisan vote that would include both Democrats and Republicans. And that bill, HR 5680, quickly passed the House by an overwhelming margin. Actually, there's an extra one on the slide here. That's our mistake. So there's not more than 1,000 people in the House. There's only 435 people in the House, but it was 335 to 89. And then with 90 Republicans and 1 Democrat voting no on that bill. Soon after, that bill passed the Senate, and before the deadline of Saturday night at midnight was signed into law by President Biden. So what does that do? That bill will extend government funding basically at current levels. I like to think of continuing resolutions as putting the government on autopilot, at least on the spending side, for 45 days. The next deadline will be November 17th, at which point Congress will have to act again in order to extend funding or pass actual year-long spending bills. In addition to the extension of funding, there are several other provisions that were included, mostly extensions to other things that were set to expire. So, or things that came in response to sort of more acute needs. funding for community health centers, and primary care workforce funding, which in some measure goes outside of the appropriations process, had to be extended as well. That was extended for those same 45 days. There was some disaster assistance funding included to address flooding and wildfires, including the wildfires in Hawaii. And then there was a short-term extension until the end of the year of the legislation that governs the Federal Aviation Administration. And as I mentioned, Celicia will talk more about this in the next slide. Several things that were being debated but were not included at the end of the day. One, there was no funding for additional funding that the administration had requested for assistance to Ukraine. This is something that is by and large supported by majorities of both House Democrats, House Republicans, Senate Democrats, and Senate Republicans, but there are some who are sort of vocally opposed. And in order to get the votes that were needed and move this funding extension expeditiously, they left out any funding for Ukraine. So that's going to be one of the real marquee issues as they go into the next deadline in November. There was also no changes to border security policy. As many people know, there is a large influx of folks coming across the southern border. There's a wide range of policy proposals being proposed in terms of how to respond to that. And at various points during the debate over government funding, folks had insisted on, well, if we're going to extend funding, we need to see changes on border policy. That was not included in order to, again, move this expeditiously and with bipartisan support. There's also several healthcare related programs and authorities that were set to expire. Now, it's important to note that not in every case does the funding expire for these programs, but it's more the sort of governing authority for those programs. This is a bit of an alphabet soup, but the first one listed here, PEPFAR, is the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. This is started under the Bush administration legislation to support efforts to combat AIDS in Africa. There's also the Support Act, which is a piece of legislation from 2018 created to focus on the opioid epidemic. There's also the Pandemic and All Hazards Preparedness Act, or PAPA, which is legislation that focuses on pandemic preparedness. So those authorities were not extended. These are things that are going to have to be dealt with still, hopefully before the end of the year. So that's sort of the facts of what's happened legislatively. It's where we stand now in terms of government funding. Just as a reminder, that government funding debate affects the Paralysis Resource Center, which the Reeve Foundation operates in partnership with the Administration for Community Living. It impacts the National Institutes of Health, the Department of Defense, and other areas, all of which we follow for the foundation. What it set off in terms of the political ramifications of this decision by Speaker McCarthy to pass the bill with bipartisan support is pretty unprecedented. So all along, he had been balancing, on one hand, a desire to pass legislation that could pass the House, extend government funding with only support from his Republican majority. And on the other hand, the challenge of finding a path forward that could pass the House, pass the Senate, and be signed into law by the president in a way that didn't require him to sort of go bipartisan and get Democratic votes. As we said, in the end, he did need Democratic votes in order to pass this legislation, changed it at the last minute, passed it with overwhelming support. But what that opened up and what has played out was a challenge to his position as Speaker. There's a provision in House rules called a motion to vacate. It allows one member to challenge the Speaker of the House and essentially vote to oust them from the job. Following his decision to take a bipartisan path here, a representative from Florida, Matt Gaetz, introduced such a resolution. The House voted on that resolution yesterday, and Speaker McCarthy was removed from his job as Speaker. And so this is something that's actually never happened in US history before. It's pretty momentous. And what will happen next is a lot of uncertainty, first and foremost, about sort of how things go forward from here. There's an interim speaker, Representative Patrick McHenry from North Carolina, but he does not have a lot of power other than to sort of oversee the election of the next speaker. That election has been set for a week from today, October 11th. And so far, two members, Representative Steve Scalise of Louisiana, who is the current #2 in House leadership, and Representative Jim Jordan of Ohio, who's chairman of the Judiciary Committee, have announced that they will run for speaker. So it's very unclear who's got the votes to win that. What the speaker election requires is that you actually have not just a majority of the majority, but that you have a majority of the entire House. So if everyone is present and voting, you have 218 votes to pass to become elected speaker. So there's going to be a lot of jockeying over the next week. What does this mean for that November deadline and things going forward? Even those with the best crystal ball, I think, can't tell you exactly what this means, but I think it means that finding compromise, finding a place forward between the Senate, the House, and the administration is going to be harder now, having seen the consequences within the party of finding a bipartisan path forward. I think new leadership is going to be more reluctant to do that. And so we're going to have to be paying very close attention. Advocacy is going to be really important. It's a really important time for those who are engaged to stay up to date on all that's going on from the foundation. And so we just wanted to give some context on that, just because you've, I'm sure, been reading about it in the news, and it does have an impact on all of our advocacy. But I think the big lesson here today is it's just more important than ever to stay engaged in advocacy, because the more dysfunction and chaos there is in Congress, the more we need to raise our issues and the key priorities here up and break through the noise. So just wanted to share that. Happy to answer questions at the end about the process piece. Before we go on from congressional updates, I'm going to turn it over to Celicia in the next slide to talk about the FAA and what it means for some of the priorities around disabilities and transportation.
Thanks so much for that, John. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Again, my name is Celicia Lomax, and I am John's colleague at Waxman Strategies. I know a lot of what you heard is probably a lot. A lot has happened in the past 3 or 4 days, and it can be a lot to wrap our heads around. So we, again, are happy to answer questions at the end. But I did want to share a little bit of updates on another piece that we've been following, which is the FAA reauthorization. For a little bit of a level set, FAA, generally, I'll be saying that stands for the Federal Aviation Administration. And every 5 years, Congress has to pass an FAA reauthorization bill to essentially keep funding the work that the FAA does. They have continued governance and regulation of the aviation industry to really ensure safety for both workers and for passengers, and also to look at growth broadly within the space. So that's just a little bit of a level set. As John mentioned earlier, that same legislation that passed, that continuing resolution that continues to fund the government until November, included an extension, a 3-month extension of FAA funding until the end of the year. So it goes until December 31st of this year, and really allows them to continue the same authorities that the FAA has had and continue the work of the aviation industry writ large. Part of the reason why they need this 3-month extension is more so dealing with negotiations on the Senate side. They need that additional time to reach that final agreement because, again, we'll be looking at a multi-year bill, ideally another set of 5 years looking at funding, but there are additional amendments and provisions that various members and advocates are interested in that would be a part of this bill. One of those pieces that actually is where some of the debate is happening on the Senate side is related to pilot training requirements. There's some members have an interest in increasing the hours that there would be for pilot training, and there's some disagreement on both the format in which that training happens in, whether it's virtual or in person or another format, and how long those should be. So that's one slightly larger point of contention that has been a part of the ongoing conversations on this FAA bill. There's several other amendments that are particularly important, I know, for a number of advocates that are here on this webinar with us, and also in the broader space. One is related to more transparency around compensation, particularly for delays and cancellations of flights. I'm sure many of us have encountered this or have had peers who have encountered this, where there's been a number of delays and cancellations in recent years. And this is something that within this FAA reauthorization bill, folks are looking at opportunities to address that or at least compensate passengers who are trying to get to their destination and ensure that those issues are being addressed. Another piece more so on the disability related side is that there would be a mandate that sets aircraft accessibility standards. And that language has been in there and it has more bipartisan support within the House. And that's where the Senate is also looking. There's also provisions in there related to the Department of Transportation and their ability to both investigate and respond to various disability related complaints within the aviation industry. And I know through the Reeve Foundation, a number of folks have shared their stories of what has happened to them. And this is another space in which working with the Department of Transportation to respond to more of those issues is a key area that folks are looking at for this bill. And the last piece that I'll just mention are additional requirements that would go into this bill that makes airline mobile applications more accessible for folks too. And so thinking about all of those pieces, those standards and quality of standards for the aviation industry is another area that we're following very closely. And the sort of other side of that we're looking at is penalties for failure to actually meet those standards. So what exactly will go in place if various airlines and others are not following those specific provisions. So again, this right now, the current funding will continue for the FAA through the end of the year, and folks will be looking at these additional amendments and provisions for the new FAA reauthorization when we get to December. And as our team continues to track that, we'll make sure that you all are updated. And now I think I will be passing it over to Angel.
Thank you, Celicia. And just want to say thank you quickly to all of the advocates on the call who worked with us this year on the FAA reauthorization. That was one of our priorities. So some of you on the call may have attended the Hill Day or responded to one of the action alerts that you received from Gerard, and we just really appreciate it. We're almost there with this extension, so thank you for that. Next slide, please. So I'll just quickly give some updates on some of the things that we've been working on. I represent the foundation on our various coalitions that we're a member of that supports people with disabilities. First is the SSI Savings Penalty Elimination Act. This is a bill that Reeve Foundation has endorsed. It's a really great bill, bipartisan bill that was introduced by Senators Brown and Senator Cassidy. And this would increase the asset limit for people with disabilities. For an individual, the asset limit would be increased from $2,000 to $10,000. And for married couples, it would go from $3,000 to $20,000. So this is something that we are really excited about. And I'll make sure as we learn more information about how you can help us advocate for this, look out for more information on the bill, most likely in one of Gerard's newsletters. Also, we are really thrilled about NIH announcing that people with disabilities will now be designated as a population with health disparities. So this is so important because this will allow for additional funding and research into the barriers that people with disabilities face. The entire community of advocacy groups was fighting for this. So this was a really exciting announcement that we heard last week, I think it was. It's been a busy month. Also, just following up on what Kim spoke on earlier on the updates to section 504, there's a new proposed rule focused on prohibiting disability-based discrimination in public programs. So this includes, access to medical equipment and prohibiting disability discrimination in medical treatment, ensuring access to medical equipment and medical exam tables, ensuring accessibility on digital platforms, including when you go to the doctor and you have to check in on a tablet or a kiosk. Is this accessible? So these are all the things that are discussed in the proposed rule, and you have an option to be able to comment on it. So what I'll do after I'm done talking, I can put in the chat more information on where you can comment. We recently had a blog post about this, so we'll provide you with that information. And last, there was a new rule that the Department of Transportation announced requiring all U.S. airlines to make bathrooms more accessible for wheelchair users. So this is so exciting, and so many people for many, many years have been advocating to make lavatories more accessible on bathrooms. All new orders of airplanes will now have to be built to be accessible. So we may not see this until the next 10 to 12 years, but there are some accommodations that they are going to be trying to make in the meantime so that we can see some immediate action around this. So we're very thrilled about that. All right, next slide. Oh, All Wheels Up Global Forum for Wheelchair Accessible Air Travel. I attended this conference with my colleague Gerard last week, and it was very exciting to see the future of accessible air travel in person. We heard from various engineers and developers, and were able to see some prototypes on how wheelchair users can stay in their wheelchair on board. So Gerard, if you want to, you see there's an image there of this is the Delta prototype that was unveiled this summer, and we all got to see it. It was so exciting to see. There were some wheelchair users in the room that were able to back in, and they were able to be locked into their chair. And there, I believe one person was still able to recline a little bit. So yes, this was very exciting. And I feel like I attended the same conference last year, and a lot of the talk was about how can we do it, and like where will you be able to wheel it onto, or how will it lock in? And this was like, it's gonna happen. Now let's talk about the regulation to be able to get this on board on a plane soon. So I feel very positive about this. Next slide. And the last thing I just want to say about air travel is we just wanted to note that the Department of Transportation and United Airlines had a settlement agreement following the complaint from the late disability rights activist shown here in Gracia Figueroa, who sadly passed away due to injuries sustained when her wheelchair was damaged on board a United Airlines plane. So they came to an agreement, and United will implement several actions to improve air travel for wheelchair users. We released a joint statement with PVA and Hand in Hand and United Spinal, and we just stated that this is a good step in the right direction, but there's definitely a lot more to be done. So that statement is on our website, and we can also include that and follow-up materials. Great. And next slide. I think handing it over to Gerard.
Hello, I'm here. Well, thank you so much, Angel. Thank you, Kim, John, Alicia. We've had a lot of updates, you've heard, but now we're going to get to the grassroots advocacy part. So I'm just going to quickly go over some numbers with you, but again, I'm just really excited to be here with you all. So not done just yet, but we are almost there. Let me see if I can get the slide. Hold on, the slides. There we go. So since I started with the Reeve Foundation, which was last July, our regional champions program has grown so much in numbers, and I'm just so thankful for everyone who has decided to join the program, speaking with me. It's just really incredible, and I just really thank you guys so much. But currently we have 75 regional champions in 28 states. Now that is a lot. As you can see on the slide, our goal is to try to get a regional champion in every single United State and territory. And then a little bit on the numbers of our online advocates for change. As of today, we are at 10,622 online advocates for change nationwide. So that's really incredible. However, our goal for the end of the year is to reach 12,000 advocates nationwide. So I really think we can do it. We are on the way to 12,000. But I'm just, again, so happy with the numbers and just with everyone talking with me and just being a part of this team and program. So, but if you'd like to get involved, you can scan the nice QR code on your screen and it will take you to the sign up page. And we always have room for more regional champions. So if you want to join, if you're interested, I'll put my contact info at the end and we could set up a time for you to chat with me. But our regional champions come from all over the country. And speaking of some of our regional champions, I do want to highlight one individual who's been with the program since March. And like many of our regional champions, she's participated in our virtual Congressional Hill Day back in May and has had the opportunity to meet with her legislator's office virtually. Her name is Catherine Magnoli, and the Reeve Foundation is just so lucky to have her on the regional champions roster. Catherine's a children's book author and a passionate community advocate. She resides in Sunny Isles Beach, Florida, and is very active in her local community. And this is really great, and I'm so happy for her because this past summer, Catherine was instrumental in advocating on behalf of the disability community by successfully having the city of Sunny Isles Beach to observe Disability Pride Month every July, and went further to getting the city to agree to install more accessible beach mats. There are 3 additional beach mats in the city. And since she is a resident, she's when we were talking, she told me she only had access to one of the beaches, and that wasn't enough. So like all advocates, Catherine did her research. She met with her local officials, the mayor, vice mayor, 3 commissioners, and presented her case. Unanimously, they all voted and agreed to the installation. So her next step now is to meet with the city manager to discuss the locations and get those mats placed. So again, Catherine, thank you for being a devoted and passionate regional champion and advocating your local community. So that's a little happy story of what Catherine did over the summer. However, this leads me to the next slide because 2 weeks ago, the Raise Family Caregiving Advisory Council held a full council meeting, which focused on the analysis of public comments on the 2022 National Strategy to Support Family Caregivers and updates from federal agencies about their progress in implementing the strategy. One of our regional champions, her name is Felicia Gibson, is on the council currently. And from her experience as a caregiver for her husband after he was injured due to gun violence, she has learned a lot about spinal cord injuries and how much of caregivers themselves give to assist others. Our team nominated her last year to serve a term on the Raise Family Caregiving Council, and her nomination was accepted. She is excited to join and ensure that the concerns and needs of caregivers are known and addressed. And if you don't remember, we mentioned this a couple webinars ago, but last term, another regional champion, his name is James Murtha, he served on the council prior to Felicia joining, and we're just thrilled that some of our regional champions have this unique opportunity to be part of this very important caregiving council. So again, James, Felicia, thank you for your participation and serving. Next up, let's see how we're doing. We're doing good on time. But next up, after the day after the Raise Family Caregiving Council meeting, I hosted our second Regional Champions coffee session. Now, this was a very informal event, but during the session, my goal was just to invite regional champions to join and get to know each other because, again, we're all advocating for the same goal, and it is just nice to know what other regional champions are up to in their local communities around the country, like I was talking about Catherine. But we had regional champions from California, Ohio, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and we even had a special guest from the NPRC. It was Regina Bly, who is the Chief Program Policy Officer of the National Paralysis Resource Center. And I just want to thank my colleagues, Christina and Bernadette and Regina, just for being on the call with me, getting to know some of the regional champions. It was an hour session, but time flew by. And I just heard a lot of great things that our regional champions are doing in their local communities and what they did this past summer. So there will be more to be planned. So keep a lookout on my newsletters. But again, it's a very informal session. I had a latte with me. It was delicious. And some of the other regional champions had coffee, tea, whatever they wanted to drink as well. So this is a little screenshot that I took. I forgot to get Regina. She had to jump off, but yeah, no, it was really such a great session. And I was so happy that we were able to bring some of the regional champions together. And now on this next slide, we're going to talk about complex rehab technology advocacy. But for the second year in a row, my colleague Angel and I participated in the NCARD virtual congressional fly-in, where we met with members of Congress to advocate and provide education and insight to policy influencers and communicated the need for support to enhance and ensure access to CRT for individuals with disabilities. It was a big day filled with meetings, kind of exhausting, but it was a lot of fun. At least I had a lot of fun. But now the next day, on the 14th of September, the Reeve Foundation had the opportunity to attend an exhibit at the Complex Rehab Technology Congressional Product Expo on Capitol Hill right here in DC. And we just had a chance to speak with legislators' offices, some staff members came up to our table. We gave out some of the free resources from the NPRC. And in the pictures you can see here, you see Kim and I sporting our Team Reeve shirts at the exhibit table. And then another picture is with me and this girl named Zoe Harrison. She's from Michigan. And she was just chatting it up with Kim and I. And she even writes her own books. And it was just so nice to meet her and to be there. But it was a great way to close out a very busy week, which was, I think, now 3 weeks ago. Now for some action alerts. We don't have a live action alert out yet. However, like John was saying, with giving us an update on appropriations and where we're at in Congress, the CR is set to expire on November 17th. So please keep watch for an upcoming action alert that will ask our online advocates and regional champions to contact their legislators to protect and urge them to protect PRC funding at current levels, which is at $10.7 million for fiscal year 2024. We do want our elected leaders to know how important the PRC is to the paralysis community, and that any cuts will limit the resources and the services provided to individuals living with paralysis, their families, and caregivers. So definitely keep a watch. I'll include in my newsletter. You'll probably get an email as well. So more to come on that. So again, another campaign that the Reeve Foundation is doing. I think it was about a couple weeks ago, we sent out an email, but it's the Reeve Foundation's Outdoors for Everyone campaign, which is an initiative encouraging people to raise awareness of outdoor equity for people living with all forms of paralysis by partnering with parks, trails, and organizations around the US to identify and implement accessible and inclusive areas and activities for all people, including those living with disabilities, their families, and caregivers. So there is a QR code on your screen. If you scan the QR code, and you can check out our accessible outdoor checklist for parks, recreation centers, and others to ensure people living with paralysis and other disabilities are able to enjoy the outdoors. The checklist serves as an educational resource with recommendations and suggestions on how to strengthen and accessibility and inclusivity throughout the entire outdoor experience. So we have one more slide to get to, and then we'll get to questions. This is a little bit about our upcoming events, so bear with me. So yes, this weekend, October 8th, is the Chicago Marathon. Team Reeve will be participating in that. this year has been the biggest yet for Team Reeve. I believe we have over 80 runners total. And you can see I put some pics of myself and my colleagues, Christina, Mary, and Colleen, who will be taking on the New York City Marathon, which is happening on Sunday, November 5th. We're really excited. I'm a little nervous. I don't know, I've been training since the spring, but again, I'll update everyone how that marathon goes. But really, it's all Team Reeve members are raising money for spinal cord injury groundbreaking research. And I just know that the colleagues at Reeve and I were just excited. But besides the upcoming marathons, next week, I will be in Abbeville, Louisiana, on Thursday, October 12th, hosting our second regional advocacy training. This is in person. We did one virtual for Alabama back in June. And again, this training is designed for local community members to learn more about the services provided by the NPRC, access free resources, and also just gain valuable insight on our advocacy program. So I am working with another regional champion. Her name is Justina. She lives in Louisiana, and we have been coordinating this. This has been months planning, but again, so excited to be out there in Louisiana. And if you're around that area, it's being hosted at the Abbeville Public Library. But yeah, and also more good news, I will be doing an Instagram takeover of that event. So you'll be able to see like behind the scenes and just what the event's like I did back in June in Shippensburg, Pennsylvania. So make sure you follow the Reeve account. It's at Reeve Foundation, and you can follow along the journey in Abbeville. And then lastly, we have the Unite to Fight Paralysis annual symposium in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And that is going to bring together the major stakeholder groups and curative treatments such as scientists, clinicians, industry, funders, and the spinal cord injury community, all centering around the voice and perspective of the SCI community. Another key thing, Dr. Marco Baptista, who is the Reeve Foundation's Chief Scientific Officer, will be speaking on the new research vision of the foundation and explain how the field enabling initiatives will bring us closer to transformative treatments via building a more robust clinical pipeline in spinal cord injury. So I will be in Minnesota as well. I'll be looking forward to meeting some new industry leaders and learning more about paralysis research. But now we are finally at the close of our presentation. So thank you all again, but lots of updates. And I believe we do have some time for questions. So I'm going to hand it back over to Kim. But again, thank you all again for listening and just being here.
Gerard, thank you so much. We're so grateful to have you part of the team, your enthusiasm, your dedication. You really keep us on our toes. And again, I want to just say thank you in that you've connected with so many wonderful new advocates. And I really encourage people to reach out to Gerard. He really spends a lot of time to get to know you. We have one comment in the chat that is from, I can't tell who it's from exactly, but the person is asking Catherine. So Catherine, thank you so much for joining and also for your work in Florida. They would like to know if you could please post a roadmap for others so that they could do this in their own states. And Gerard, I wonder, it would, since, you know, sometimes these webinars can be a little difficult to communicate with each other, that you can connect the advocates together to share their wins or set up a Zoom or something so that we can have advocates train other advocates on what they're doing locally. So we appreciate everyone who's joined. We'll have Kat. We'll figure out how to connect you, the two advocates. Thank you so much. I think it's really wonderful. Or maybe on the next webinar, we could just have a Kat talk about it to everyone. We could do that too. So again, I want to thank everyone for joining. I realize we sped through lots of information. There's a lot happening. We're spending a lot of time making sure that we're protecting the PRC, we're advancing all of our priorities, and that we're recruiting as many advocates to be part of the foundation as we can. We cannot do this alone, and you are the experts, and we're just so grateful that you're a part of our team too. So if there's no other questions, Gerard will follow up with all of you. And again, I know he'll hold another coffee, a virtual coffee. We hope you join him in that. Take care, everyone. Again, reach out with any questions. Let me just make sure that there's no more final questions. And yep, I think that's it. We'll send the recording around Any questions, any further questions, please contact us. Thank you, Julia, on the back end. Thank you all to on the panel. Have a great day.
Bye, everyone. See ya.
Thank you, bye-bye.